Hello and welcome to this vlog post. Fantasy fans, prick up your ears, for today I will be sharing with you the first in Cas Peace's Artesans of Albia trilogy. This is the first in a triple trilogy, so it's an epic adventure for those of you who like sagas. The first is called King's Envoy. I'm so sorry, Cas, I don't have your book. I'm reading from my phone. Please don't judge me. I'm going to read to you the back of what would be the book if I was holding it in my hands. Taran Elijah's quest for knowledge uncovers a plot that threatens the world. In Albia, the fourth realm, the precious artisan gift is dying. Although born to the craft, Taran is struggling to achieve his potential. Against his friend's advice, he embarks on a foolhardy plan to acquire the teaching he craves. Alone, he crosses into Andarian, the fifth realm, but instead of finding a mentor, he stumbles upon a treacherous plot. In the wake of Taran's actions, Albia suffers a series of vicious raids, and Major Sullian of the High King's forces is sent to oppose them. But a dark and treacherous force is moving through the realms, and both Taran and Sullian will feel its power. The craft, the lives of their friends, the very existence of their realm are under threat unless they expose and oppose the evil. Let me just find for you, I'm going to read the first few pages of the first chapter. So this is King's Envoy, the first in Cas Peace's Artesans of Albia trilogy. There's also a really beautiful song included at the end of this audiobook, which was written by Cas Peace and her folk band. Written and performed, and it's really, really lovely. There is a sample of the song in the audiobook, but it's sung by me, so it's not as good. Chapter 1. Albia, the fourth realm, Highcombe village in Loxton province. Are you quite sure about this, Taran? Cal's voice echoed in the gloom as Taran Elijah closed the cellar door behind them. He raised the lantern, and sharp-edged shadows fled up the walls. Taran glanced at his apprentice, standing 3 steps below him, and ran a hand through his short brown hair. It came away clammy as he wiped it on his shirt. I have to go, Cal. It's my last chance. Cal frowned, taking in Taran's tall but sturdy frame, clad in leather pants and boots, the sword belted at his side, and the pack of supplies slung over his shoulder. He met Taran's hazel eyes. What if there's something we haven't thought of? Trying to keep his voice level, Taran said, I've tried every way I can think of to find another teacher. Sorry, I keep losing my place. My father was right. There simply aren't any artisans left in Loxton province. Maybe even in the whole of Albia. Entering the fifth realm might be dangerous, but it's the only place I'm going to find other members of our craft. The words sounded sharper than he'd intended. As Cal turned to descend the steps, Taran saw him shrug. He followed, his heart pounding. When Cal reached the bottom, he crossed the floor to the only items the cellar contained, a bedroll and a night pot. Taran watched the younger man drop a small pack of food on the floor and turned to face his master. Taran halted opposite Cal and gave him what he hoped was a reassuring smile. He shrugged out of his pack and laid it down. He was beginning to tremble, although it was more from tension than excitement. Where's your courage, man? He berated himself. You're 28 years old and a journeyman. It's not as if you haven't created a portway before. Ah, yes, came a sly thought. But not without your father watching your every move, making sure you got the sequences right. Taran took a deep breath, filling his lungs with cool, chalky air. He shoved away his misgivings. His father had died 2 years ago. He'd have to do this by himself. He was perfectly capable. Journeyman was the 3rd of the 8 artisan ranks, and he had mastered the primary element of earth. He could also influence the secondary, water, and was well on the way to becoming an adept. All he needed was a bit more instruction, and what he had planned for today would, with just a little luck, be the means of obtaining it. He set the lantern on a shelf and cast its gaze to the cellar's rocky floor. I got that sentence completely wrong. He set the lantern on its shelf and cast his gaze to the cellar's rocky floor. It was formed like a shallow bowl and would help shape the earth force he intended to call. Across the space, he caught the diamond glitter of Cal's eyes. Ready? Cal shrugged again. I'm ready. It's not as if I'm doing anything. You'll be guarding the portway, Cal. Without you, I wouldn't be doing this in the first place. And probably shouldn't be doing it now, he thought, unable to quell his doubts. Once he had formed the portway, he intended to leave it active. This was a huge risk, he knew, a breach of every rule he'd been taught. Never, ever leave a portway open, son. You don't know what might make use of it. His father's disapproving tone resounded in Taryn's mind, yet he was determined to ignore it. He was terrified of becoming stranded in the Fifth Realm, and, even if all went according to plan, creating a new portway when he needed to return would cost him too much time and energy. The skills of a journeyman weren't sufficient to determine where such portals would open, so he could end up many miles from his village when he came back. Asking Cal to maintain and guard it was the best solution Taryn could think of. He intended to weave his young apprentice's strength into the structure as he formed it, so all Cal had to do was stay in the cellar. He had his bedroll, supplies, and the lantern. He'd be all right. Everything would be all right. It had to be. Catching Cal's nod of acceptance, Taryn took a slow breath, closed his eyes, and gave himself a moment to settle into the cellar's thick silence. He turned his gaze inward and sought his psyche, the unique pattern through which an artisan channeled his power. The walls and spirals materialized in his mind. Soft with pearly colours, the pattern's familiarity soothed Taryn's nerves. Gathering his strength, he called on the power every artisan possessed, metaforce, and it rose, suffusing his soul. His heart exulted as the power grew, and his body sang with potential. Taryn revelled in its glory. This was as much a part of him as his arms or legs, yet he could never have used the wondrous gift without his father's years of instruction. Metaphors was present in everyone, though only artisans could learn its power. Taryn's lessons with his adept elite father might not have been pleasant. Amanus was neither a natural nor a sympathetic teacher, but his yearning to expand his knowledge was overwhelming. The same need was driving him to attempt this risky trip. Once his entire body was attuned to the power, Taryn turned his attention to Cal. The young man was inexperienced. He was only just starting to learn about metaphors and could only influence Earth. He was strong, though. Taryn could sense his fledgling power. Rushing through his veins. Reaching out with his psyche, Taryn melded it to Cal's, feeling his apprentice surrender control. He raised his arms, palms downward, and sent his metasenses deep into the rock, searching for the earth's elemental signature. Within minutes, a familiar, thrilling tingle shot through Taryn as the primal element responded. Slow, majestic, immeasurably powerful, the energy of earth rose at his call, filling the bowl at his feet. That was the first couple of pages of Cas Peace's King's Envoy, which is the first in her Artesans of Albia trilogy. Sorry for all of the additional words that I put in there, Cas. Your version is definitely much better than mine. So that's the first of Cas's triple trilogy, and it's set in this fantastical world. I'm going to use that word again. Fantasy lovers, you will adore this book. It's really well written and it's really compelling. So I advise you to go to Audible, iTunes or Amazon. I'm going to put the link to the Audible below. Oh God, I've lost all of my words today. And you can purchase yourself. I do have a select number of freebies if you wanted to listen to it for free. I really recommend it. That's all I'm going to say today.